Good afternoon from the heart of Jerusalem, dear friends, family, and colleagues. Dan Diker here, president of the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. I'm delighted and honored to be joining you again on day 32 of this Hamas-Israel war following the October 7th massacre, unprecedented in the 2,000-year history of the Jewish people in Israel, and the worst event of mass murder of Jews in general since the Holocaust. We have the IDF has made great progress in its counterterrorism strike and war against the Hamas in Gaza, essentially splitting Gaza into two. But as we surround Gaza City and the Hamas leadership, we are facing great challenges because we're moving much closer to a number of installations that are housing the Hamas leadership. And those installations, as you may know through our analysis and assessment in the past, where we are talking about hospitals, we are talking about other areas where civilians are housed and where the Hamas leadership has ensconced itself using their own public as human shields. So we'll hear more about that today. I'm really honored to be joined by my friend and colleague, Lieutenant Colonel Reserve Maurice Hirsch, and our special guest today, senior JCPA analyst and fellow, Yoni Ben Menachem. Welcome to both of you, dear colleagues. I know you're both there on Zoom. I like much more when you're here next to me in person, but I know that these days it's very difficult for us all to be in the same place at the same time every day. I'm going to turn to you, Maurice, just for a quick update as to where we are right now before we turn to Yoni Ben Menachem, who has some really very important information to share with us and assessments that he's gotten from his own intelligence sources inside Gaza. And I think that our friends, family, and colleagues from abroad will be very interested to hear here in our Zoom wartime diplomatic briefing information and assessment they will not get anywhere else. I'm confident in saying that, and you'll hear it in a moment. Maurice, I'm turning the floor over to you for the very quick update, the videos about some of the problematic places where the Hamas leadership has ensconced itself, and then we'll turn to Yoni. Go ahead, Maurice.
Thanks, Dan. So as we said, we're talking about day 32. The fighting continues on in Gaza, with IDF forces now completely surrounding the Gaza city. The northern part of Gaza has been separated from the southern part, and the forces are activating and operating in that area, since that is really the stronghold of Hamas. In today's, just a brief little update there, we had a continued calls from the IDF of the civilian population in Gaza, in the north of Gaza, to continue moving south, considering the massacre carried out by Hamas yesterday and in the previous days of the Palestinians themselves fleeing southwards. Today, the IDF spokesman issued a statement saying that the movement of the Palestinians southward would be protected by tanks, by IDF tanks, so that the Hamas terrorists couldn't kill any more Palestinians. So that was one of the interesting developments of today. The terrorists themselves continued on firing rockets to the area around the Gaza Strip, with IDF forces constantly uncovering more and more of these rocket launchers. Yesterday, they found a whole barrage of rocket launchers that had been placed in a mosque and in a site used by the Palestinian scouts. Over 50 rockets, it would appear, were fired from that site. Again, one of these clear and blatant abuses of both religious sites and sites where children are involved, so that they could maximize both the protection that they think they can get and the abuse of the religious sites and the children as part of their operational plans. In the north, we're carrying on with the same tit for tat that's been going on there since the start of the war with Hezbollah. Yesterday, we saw a massive onslaught, actually from Hamas terrorists in Lebanon, who fired over 30 rockets from Lebanon into the south, with a response from Israel, targeting both them and other terrorist assets in southern Lebanon. In Judea and Samaria, we've seen the continuation also of not a small level or a low level of terrorist activities, with constant attempts to carry out more terrorist attacks, and IDF forces arresting dozens of Hamas terrorists every single day. Yesterday in Jerusalem, we saw an attack on a border guard soldier, Rose Lubin, who was initially injured but then later died of her wounds. So we're seeing also possibly a little bit of an uptick in terrorist activity also in Jerusalem, which until now has been relatively quiet. But as you said, Dan, what we're going to discuss today in Yoni's briefing are the medical facilities in the Gaza Strip, some of which are, all of which are being used by Hamas to hide their terror infrastructure. We're going to focus in specifically on the Shifa Hospital, one of the bigger hospitals in Gaza, definitely the biggest hospital in Gaza City, where we know that Hamas has built its command center. We've known that already since 2014. So now we have just a little bit more information as to what's going on, and a few videos that we'll be able to put in to show our viewers as we develop the conversation. One video just showing the general vicinity of the hospital itself and the Hamas infrastructure. A second video showing really an illustration of the hospital above ground and the Hamas infrastructure below ground. And then a third video, an interview with one of the terrorists who was arrested at the scene of the massacre, that has been released by the Israel Security Agency and the police and the IDF, where he describes how the terrorists intentionally use the hospitals and medical facilities. So that's really what we're going to discuss today. As we go along, Yoni, when you're ready, tell me and I'll show the videos. Maybe we could just start with the first video. We have our technical assistant, Daniel Levine, who's always accompanying us, and I always misspeak by not thanking him for the support. So Daniel, thank you for the support. Can we show just the first video today now, please? So what we're seeing here is the Shifa Hospital from the air. As you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, it's located in the northern area of the Gaza Strip, just a kilometer in from the sea. It's an entire compound, obviously, it isn't only one block. And now what you're seeing, Daniel, if you could just stop the video for a second. What you're seeing, ladies and gentlemen, are these red areas are the main terrorist infrastructure implanted and embedded within the compound of the hospital. Some in the outpatients area, some in the other areas underneath the main building of the hospital. That's where the main Hamas command center has been, as we know, as we said before, from 2014. Daniel, finish off the video, please, and then we can switch to Yoni. And there, as we can see, obviously the terror infrastructure located exactly near the power sources, the generators for the hospital. Those are obviously required to keep the hospital functioning. And this is what you're hearing constantly discussed in the international media of the fuel running out and the energy running out for the hospitals. Well, that's because Hamas intentionally places its terror infrastructure not only in the hospitals, but specifically also by the power sources. Yoni, please take us through okay. What we know and what we can say about the medical installations in general in the Gaza Strip, and specifically the Shifa Hospital.
Okay, as we notice, the IDF incursion into Gaza Strip, actually the north of Gaza Strip, was very successful, and the IDF is working very well military-wise, and it succeeded to surround Gaza City completely. Nobody can escape, and actually there's a siege imposed by the IDF on Gaza City so that the terrorists of Hamas cannot escape to the south of Gaza. Maybe they can do it through the tunnels, but at least up the ground, they cannot do that. This is very significant, and now the coming days are supposed to be the climax of the military operation of the IDF. And why is that? Because the whole aim of the surrounding of Gaza City and the incursion is to get to the head of the snake. The head of the snake is the commanders of the military wing of Hamas. There are three important master terrorists that Israel wants to find and kill. The first one is the most senior one, is Muhammad the Death, who is the general commander of the military wing of Hamas, and then Yahya Sinwar, who is the political and military commander of Gaza Strip, and Marwan Issa, who is one of the deputies of Muhammad Death and Yahya Sinwar. These are the three terrorists who are considered the head of the snake. So capturing them or killing them can be a very success and big success for the IDF. That means that if the IDF succeed in fulfilling this mission, this will help very much to topple Hamas regime. This is very important. So what Hamas is doing is that they are about, according to security sources, Israeli security sources, about 30 medical facilities in all of Gaza Strip that Hamas is using to protect its terrorists, the commanders of the military wing, and the main facility is in Gaza City, what we just saw on the video, the Shifa hospital, which is a big complex. There are other medical facilities near the hospital itself. There's a hospital also for eye diseases and things like that. It's a big compound. The Shifa hospital, in it, there are about 1,500 beds, and the staff is about 4,000 people. Just imagine, this is the biggest hospital in the Gaza Strip, but the other hospitals also are used as shelter for terrorists. Why does the army concentrate on Shifa hospital? Because according to the information, the intelligence information that the army has, under the hospital there's a big bunker and tunnels, a web of tunnels, and according to the information, these three terrorists that I mentioned are hiding under the hospital. This is the command center. This is where they operate the launching of missiles and the anti-tech attacks on the IDF and so on. And it's a big complex compound of terrorism. So the army is trying to get there. What the army is doing is slowly surrounding this compound of Shifa hospital. And also at the same time, Israel is trying to get international legitimacy for this big operation, which is occupying this hospital and destroying what is underneath and killing the terrorists. This is very important to get international legitimacy. So Israel transferred all the intelligence information to various intelligence organizations, to the CIA, to MI6, to the French intelligence, and there are also contacts on the diplomatic level, so that the world will know what Hamas is doing and why it is so important for Israel to occupy this compound of terrorism and kill those terrorists. If Israel will succeed, it might also shorten the war, because capturing those terrorists is a very crucial stage of the war against Hamas. So the big problem is how to evacuate this hospital and the other hospitals, and because the IDF, I don't know, I think you know better, Maurice, is it allowed for Israel Air Force to bombard these hospitals?
Well, so that's an interesting question, Yoni. In general, I have to say that obviously military objects can be clearly targeted at any stage. Hospitals and medical facilities do enjoy an additional protection under international law, and once they are abused by the terrorists, then they too become legitimate military targets and can be attacked from whichever direction, from whether it be from the air, from the ground, soldiers, tanks, whatever it may be. Obviously, there is a requirement to give an enhanced warning, not the same warning where the IDF has called for the Palestinians to move south, but a specific warning to the Shifa hospital or to one of these medical installations that they are likely to be attacked because they are functioning as military targets. That's something which Israel hasn't yet done. There has been a general notification to some of the hospitals that they are likely to be attacked, and that could be sufficient. It could be also that Israel would provide specific, closer to the time warnings. We know that obviously the warnings are there to avoid the civilian casualties on the one hand, but as soon as we give the warnings, what Hamas will do is that they will fill the hospitals with even more civilians, most probably, and prevent the evacuation of the sick people, because that's their clear intention, to use those facilities as human shields. So,
well, Maurice, I think it's very important to emphasize to the scores of participants on this call, as well as beyond, that this represents a double war crime by Hamas that is not being reported by international media other than perhaps on the American version on Fox and the American version of CNN. Hamas, with malice aforethought, is using its own sick and wounded patients as human shields as it fires purposely at Israeli hospitals with its rockets and missiles that it is still firing from the Gaza Strip. And still you hear the narrative in the international, especially in the Western media, whether it's television, radio, or press, to focus on the unfolding human disaster in the Gaza Strip, which is true, but it is Hamas that is causing the human disaster in Gaza, while it cries about the human disaster that it itself is causing. Having said that, there is a major challenge. There's a humanitarian challenge of what Israel needs to do, while the hospital is, in terms of proportionality, a legitimate military target. At the same time, how is it going to protect the lives of innocents in the hospital while simultaneously or subsequently targeting the Hamas leadership under the hospital?
So, as we know, we have a report this morning from El Rantisi Hospital in Gaza that the Israeli army gave a warning to the management of the hospital to evacuate the hospital because the IDF intends to destroy the building. And the hospital says that is in a problem because Hamas is preventing the evacuation of the patients that are hospitalized in this hospital. So I think this is what we're going to see in the coming days. Hamas trying to sabotage the Israeli efforts to evacuate the hospitals in order to provide a human shield for the terrorists underneath in the tunnels. There is a possibility the IDF will not relate to that, but it might be that some of the hostages that were kidnapped by Hamas, the Israeli hostages, some of them are held under the hospitals, especially under Shifa hospital, so that they can be used by the leadership of Hamas, of the military wing, as human shields. So this operation has to be conducted very carefully by the IDF. By the way, it's not only the military leadership of Hamas that took refuge and is hiding in these hospitals, in the medical facilities. Apparently, also the political leadership of Hamas in Gaza Strip, senior figures in the political wing are also hiding in these facilities. So it's very important that the IDF will succeed in going into these facilities, destroying them and killing those terrorists. What I want to say also is that apparently Yahya Sinwar, according to sources in Gaza, Palestinian sources, Yahya Sinwar is worried from the Israeli army closing on these hospitals, and there are conflicting reports that he might escape from the Shifa hospital through the tunnels, maybe to someplace else, even though after there were rumors yesterday, the day before yesterday, that he wants to escape maybe through the tunnels to Egypt. Yahya Sinwar, through his associates, he spread rumors or news denying that he intends to escape, saying that he will fight to the end, he will fight until the death, if necessary, because he is a mujahid. He is taking the way of jihad, and he will fight to the end. So let's hope that he stick to his promise.
Yoni, please explain to our viewers. Some of them are not familiar with Yahya Sinwar as to exactly who he is in just a minute about his background.
Okay, Yahya Sinwar, he has two hats. One hat is the head of the military wing of Hamas in Gaza Strip. The other hat is the political leader of Hamas in Gaza Strip. So he's holding the stick from two hands, and he's a very dangerous person. He was released in 2011 in the Shalit deal, exchange of prisoners deal with Hamas. He was one of the, I know him personally, he was one of the assistant of Sheikh Ahmad Yassin, the founder of the Hamas terrorist movement. And he was jailed because he personally killed a few Palestinians whom he suspected were collaborators with Israel. He simply murdered them with his own hands. A very dangerous person. After he was released in the Shalit deal, he gained momentum, and slowly he was gaining power and was elected in the internal elections in Hamas movement to be the leader of the Gaza Strip. Sinwar is the person who planned the horrible massacre together with Muhammad Def, the most wanted terrorist by Israel since 1996. He is, as I said, the general commander of the military wing of Hamas. They worked together, Muhammad Def and Yahya Sinwar. They were both born in Khan Yunis refugee camp. They know each other very well, and they are collaborating with each other against Israel. So Sinwar is now wanted by Israel, and it's very important to find him, arrest him, or kill him. Better kill him, because there is a lot of Jewish blood on his hands.
Yoni, there's a question that Khaled Abu Tame, a senior JCPA analyst of Palestinian affairs, and I discussed today on our JCPA podcast called Al Shakal Awsat Lana, or Our Middle East, and that is, what was Sinwar and Muhammad Def, what were they thinking? I mean, they knew that by carrying out this unprecedented massacre, mass killing of children, of infants, of women, beheading, burning, mass execution of teens at a party, that would trigger a major Israeli counter operation. What, from your point of view, you're an intelligence analyst. You're completely, needless to say, completely fluent in Arabic. You've got intelligence sources in Gaza. What were they thinking? Or in fact, were they basically thinking jihad, which is, it's not a rational point of view. It's holy war against Israel and the West. What, in your estimation, and share with our beloved audience here on this call, what they were thinking in order to trigger this war?
Well, there are two explanations to what happened. One school of thought says that it was a miscalculation, that they were wrong in their estimations about the Israeli reaction. They did not anticipate that their attack on the Israeli communities on the border with Gaza would be so successful that they will have big achievements, take a lot of hostages back to Gaza. And they estimated that there will be a strong Israeli military response to the attack, but maybe it will be a longer round of fighting in comparison to the rounds of fighting that were during the last years. This is one school of thought saying that this was a miscalculation. The other school of thought says that they were sure, let's be accurate, they were sure that they are a lot stronger than the IDF. They were looking at what is going on in the Israeli society, at the split in the Israeli society. You remember before the war, there was a big split about the judicial reform. And they were consulting with the Iranians, they were consulting with the Hezbollah, and they came to the conclusion this is the right timing to hit Israel very strongly, because the power of the military wing of Hamas is very strong. And also they were counting on Hezbollah and the other affiliates of Iran, like the Houthis, the militias in Syria and Iraq, that they will come to help them. So they were sure that working together with all the affiliates of Iran, especially with Hezbollah, they can beat the IDF. So these are the two explanations that we see regarding what happened.
Yoni, go
ahead, Maurice.
Is it also possible that they didn't actually believe that they would be able to carry out the extent of the massacre that they actually managed to do? As it came as a surprise to Israel, maybe is it possible that they underestimated or overestimated Israel's power of defense, and maybe they were coming to die, but they really didn't expect to be able to be so successful?
Yes, this is also true. We have to, as far as I understand, most of the intelligence sources of Israel in the Gaza Strip were compromised by Hamas. This is something very dangerous. We will not go into the details here, but I think that they managed to understand how the Israeli intelligence work, and how where does he get the information from about Gaza, and the way it analyzes this raw intelligence material. And they carried out a big deception operation very successfully. And they also managed to neutralize all the cameras on the border fence and all the special facilities that we had to protect from such an attack. But they didn't estimate right the fighting, the spirit of fighting among the Israeli soldiers. They were sure that the soldiers on the border, the Israeli soldiers on the border will fight them, and there will be reinforcement, and will be a very heavy battle there. But this is something that didn't happen, because the fact that they neutralized all the alarm systems and the cameras and the communication, this was very successful, and they managed to stop any reinforcement, possible reinforcement to come and help the soldiers on the border.
I think for that we have to be we have to mention that in that initial assault there were over 3,000 terrorists, and the soldiers and the policemen and the civilians that were there, whilst many were killed, they managed to kill over anywhere between 1,000 to 1,500 terrorists. So, and there was a tremendous amount of fighting going on there, and I think they were just overwhelmed by the size of the Hamas force.
Yoni,
Yes,
Yoni, I want you to address for our audience the direct role of the Iranian regime in this operation. And the reason I ask you this question now is that you've been one of the leading analysts on the connection between the Iranian regime and their Hamas proxy, Hezbollah proxy, Houthi proxy, and others. It has been underreported and underemphasized of the degree to which the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and their Quds Force, long arm, if you will, the long terror arm of Iran. You wrote about this in 2018-19, where there was a strategic shift in the strategy of the Hamas leadership. You connected them directly to the Hamas leadership at that time that was run by Qasem Soleimani, who was assassinated by an American drone in 2020 in Iraq. But help us understand the direct role from the point of view of strategy, execution, planning, financing, supplying of the Iranian regime in terms of the sophistication of this Hamas attack.
Okay, I hear many reports, especially from the United States, that the Americans are looking for the smoking gun, and they cannot directly tie or connect the attack, the massacre of Hamas to the Iranian regime. This is something which is absurd, because the connection has been there all along for many years, and the whole strategy of the military wing of Hamas is based on the concept of General Qasem Soleimani, who was working closely with Yahya Sinwar. If you remember the protest, the march on the fence of thousands of Palestinians, this was the Jewish communities on the border were always the target of Hamas military wing, and the March of Return phenomena that lasted for 2 years was also intended to break the fence, the border fence, infiltrate into Israel and occupy the Jewish communities there. But the IDF at that time was deployed very seriously on the border, and anyone who tried to, any Palestinian who was demonstrating and tried to get closer to the fence was shot in the leg by IDF snipers. So there was a deterrence at that time, but also the main objective all along was to infiltrate the border fence and get to the Jewish communities on the border and occupy them and have massacre. This is not something new. Then the IDF later built the new fence, which is specifically was to prevent the infiltrating tunnels underground into Israel. The fence was very successful in achieving this mission to prevent the tunnels. And as we know now, until now, there was no infiltration to Israel using tunnels, because the border fence prevented it. But the border fence from the ground up was the weak point of Israel, and they were planning how to infiltrate through the fence with the bulldozers and putting explosive on different parts of the fence. And this is how they succeeded to go into Israel. So the smoking gun issue, if we return to this point, is really doesn't need to be supported by any intelligence information, because the coordination, the level of coordination between the military wing of Hamas and the Revolutionary Guards in Iran is very, very close. There is a tight connections, and Hamas would not go to such an attack without making sure that Iran is backing Hamas directly or indirectly by its affiliates. So I think the picture is very clear.
Yeah, Yoni, just before we go to the questions, I wanted you just to address the issue of the following. This is a global jihad. This is not a war against Israel per se. The Iranian regime has several strategic objectives. One is to destroy the relationship within Israel between Arabs and Jews. The next is to destroy the growing relations between Israel, Saudi Arabia-led Gulf states, and the expanding Abraham Accords. And the third is to energize the genocidal anti-Semitism protests and demonstrations in the West, which the Hamas International Relations Department, and yes, there is such a thing, has been energized and encouraged by the many year-long pathway to jihad legitimacy in the West. I'd ask you just to comment on these three strategic objectives of the Iranian regime, so that we all understand that we really are talking about a global jihad, and we're not talking about a territorial conflict between Israel and the Palestinians.
This is very clear, because the ideology of Hamas is not different from the ideology of Al-Qaeda, from the ideology of ISIS, from the ideology of the Islamic Jihad. All these extreme jihadist movements were born from the Muslim Brotherhood movement, which is the mother of all these movements. So, and it's very clear they want to establish a global caliphate, Muslim caliphate all over the world. So it's not only Israel problem. You know, we are fighting now against Hamas, but actually we are trying to prevent Hamas and ISIS and Islamic Jihad and Al-Qaeda to spread all over the world, attain control of the global control. So this is very important, why we have to get the support of the international community, because we are now in the front line. We are fighting for them, not only for Israel. We are fighting also for the Western world, because we already see what is happening in Europe, in the United States. The jihadist octopus is trying to send its branches all over, not only into Israel. So I think that the world should understand the importance of the Israeli fight against Hamas.
Yoni, just a couple of questions from our audience. Reuven Hawk and Alan Livingston are asking similar questions, and those are, is it reasonable to assume that some of the Hamas leadership can escape through the tunnels outside to other countries, whether it's Egypt or whether it's an access to the sea and then get away by sea or into other countries?
Yes, the answer is yes. There are tunnels under the Egyptian border with Gaza Strip in Rafah area in the south of Gaza. We know that there are tunnels there that are used to smuggle weapons from Sinai into Gaza Strip. So there is a route for escape, and it's up to the Israeli intelligence to discover the plans of the military leadership of Hamas and to target them at the right minute before they try to escape.
Yoni, a question that Barbara Mazur is asking, and I'm going to take the privilege of just adding to her question. That is it your view that Hamas underestimated Israel's what they say nechishut, or determination to total victory here, as opposed to stopping for a ceasefire or coming to a compromise? And if that's the case, if it's the case that Israel is pursuing what they've declared, which is a total, complete, and overwhelming victory over the Hamas leadership, what happens the day after? How we're really in uncharted waters here, because if the Hamas leadership is destroyed, and Gaza itself has been physically, the infrastructure has been severely compromised, what happens in your view the day after? One suggestion is that the Palestinian Authority would come back, something which we at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs see as a total disaster, because Palestinian Authority wouldn't last 5 minutes in Gaza City. They would be hanged, by the light poles or thrown off of roofs, the way they were in 2007. So what is the day after look like from your point of view as an analyst of Islamic and Arab affairs?
Well, as you know, Dan, I just wrote this morning a big article about the day after, what's going to happen in Gaza, what are the different scenarios. But this, I think that you should devote a special program for this topic, because there are a lot of aspects and we cannot discuss them because we don't have time. So maybe tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, we can discuss them. But there are different scenarios, and it's going to be a very, very complicated and long campaign for Israel to achieve its goal. Right now, it is very important. You mentioned the word determination. It's very important that the Israeli leadership will stick to the determination, and in spite of the pressures, the international pressures to stop the attacks, not to listen to this international pressure, and be determined to finish the task of destroying Hamas. The Israeli army is very strong. It was working very good since the first day of the war. And if we give enough time to the IDF, it will accomplish this task successfully. So it's up to the Israeli leadership to stay strong and determined. If they will hesitate, then all the objectives of the war will not be reached.
Yes. The last question, Maurice, would you like to pose a question to Yoni before we just sort of have a last comment? We don't want to keep our viewing audience too long. It's the workday in the United States and still in Europe. Your parting question, Maurice?
So what I really want to ask Yoni is we have this whole posturing of the Hamas leaders saying they will fight until the death, but they do have this back door open to escape through all of the tunnels. How long do you think that they will actually stay in their little in their command centers, or do you actually believe that they will either just give up, just wave a white flag, or eventually run away? Because I don't believe that they honestly are willing to die. Do you believe that they are?
I think some of them are willing to die. They are jihadists, and they really believe that will get to heaven, have 72 virgins waiting for them up there in heaven. This is what they believe in, and running away, escaping will undermine their prestige among the Palestinians. I think that most of them will stay and fight. So far, we didn't see white flags. We didn't see Hamas terrorists determined. We saw them determined to keep fighting. But also the IDF soldiers are very determined, and I'm sure that the IDF determination will overcome the determination of these Hamas terrorists. And if they want to die, we will fulfill their death wish.
Yoni, that's thank you very much for your insights. I want to just mention to our friends and family and colleagues abroad that we are preparing a number of important initiatives at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. One of them is called Ivy League Jihad, how the Hamas-affiliated Students for Justice in Palestine have hijacked American campuses. We're preparing that book, which is an update of our current book called SJP Unmasked, and we will be presenting them with our Arab colleagues from Israel and from the region in the coming weeks. We need your support very much. You can email me directly at Diker, D-I-K-E-R, at jcpa.org for information about how you might help us support us. Also, in this war room, we need support. We have the finest intelligence analysts, military analysts, diplomatic analysts anywhere in Israel, and we will continue every day to keep you updated with assessments and analysis. We're really delighted. I can see all of your names, and many of you are so familiar to us. Please join us every day. Join our daily alert subscription list. That will also keep you updated. And tell your friends about this daily Zoom wartime diplomacy update as we continue to keep you updated, informed, educated. And thank you very much for joining us as you have on a daily basis. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow, and you can come to our site to see who will be briefing you, and we'll have Yoni back very shortly. And thank you to Maurice for, as always, co-hosting this